It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we're discussing the California State Athletic Commission committee meeting regarding the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act, as there's a whole lot to unpack with what transpired there. We also take a look at Thomas Hauser's profile piece on Richard Schaefer, Ilia Topuria's comments about Bud Crawford, and Tommy Fury's lies. But before we get into all that, you're going to need to subscribe or else you won't have access to everything because some of this will be behind a paywall. Now, John, how the heck are you? You have been back to work for a few days. What's it been like?
Oh, terrible. I'm not up for it. And I got, someone wanted me to kick my Isla the cat out of the recording bay here today, but nope, she gets to stay because she's my boss. She gets to tell me exactly what to do because I'm trying to win her love back. That I've been gone so long. She's very pissy towards me.
I don't know.
So
I don't know who that would be that would tell you to get rid of Isla the kitty.
Yeah, I can't believe someone would make that suggestion. That person would be so cruel. Want me to throw him outside and shut the door on him?
Throw him into the hallway. Don't act like I said to throw her outside. I said put her on the other side of the door.
Yeah, then
I do my cats.
Yeah, you might not hear it, but I will not hear the end of it if that happens. You will not. I'm not allowed to close doors here, so.
Well, all right, let's go ahead and get rolling before Miss Isla comes in and makes her presence known. So, to start off the show, we're going to look at Ilia Topuria because he seemed to have quite the knee-jerk response to Bud Crawford saying that he thought Cody Garbrandt was the best natural boxer in the UFC. So Ilia clapped back and said that he would knock Bud Crawford out with the very first punch that he threw. What do you make of that?
Well, one is, it's an example, again, that all fighters are very thin-skinned about that they're not given credit as being the best. I think that's an example here. But I think more so, this was an example of Topuria has already moved on to the phase where he's trying to get a boxing match. Because he said not only would he knock him out, but he would do it in boxing. He wouldn't even have to do it in mixed martial arts. That in the ring, he would do it. And it's a long tradition. Now we've seen it time and time again. A fighter comes up, they get big, win a title. What do they start doing? They start calling out boxers for the payday that they're looking for. We saw it with the Kamaru Usman calling out Canelo. Canelo didn't know who he was, unfortunately. We saw Sean O'Malley calling out Gervonta Davis. We've seen it time and time again that fighters that get big, they view the money to be made in boxing. The way to go is to try to get in boxing. And I think it's somewhat interesting, actually, because instead of putting energy in a way to try to figure out how to get paid in MMA, a sport that is nearly identical to boxing in that it's a broadcast on TV, they sell pay-per-views, although they might be moving away from that. They sell tickets, the revenue streams are the same. Two guys get into either a ring and a cage. All that's the same. You think they'd spend their energy thinking, instead of going into a sport where I'm going to obviously lose, how can I make it that my sport pays the same as boxing so I can make that money here in something I'm really already good at? And yet no one does that. Instead, they look at the success Francis Ngannou, Nate Diaz, and especially Conor McGregor had when they went over and did a boxing match as a sign that that's where they should put their energy instead of trying to find a way to make MMA more lucrative for them.
Let me ask you this. We haven't seen a whole lot of buzz, even this week, about Canelo versus Crawford. So I'm going to ask you personally, what do you think of the fight and who do you think's going to win? Since we're already there talking about it.
Okay, well, I'll say one thing about it. It does pass a little bit of my casual barometer meter that I have, and one of the things I always measure how big a fight is if people that I know that are casual boxing MMA fans ask me about the fight or plan to watch it, invite me over. That's a sign that it's kind of escaped velocity, escaped the bubble. And I did get an invite. So right there suggests to me that there might be more interest in this than I was aware of. Maybe because it's on Netflix and people can turn it on and it pops up. I don't know what their algorithm is. I have not been watching Netflix lately, so I have not seen any ads, but that's possible. But there does seem to be some awareness out there. It doesn't seem huge though. I'm not getting like the water cooler, the coffee room, break room conversations that I would get on other fights, but there is some interest there. Now on this fight, I'm not particularly enthusiastic about it because I do think it's just, it's obvious to me that two things are happening. Bud is purely going for the money grab, going up multiple weight classes because this is the biggest fight possible that he can do at the end of his career and cash out. Hey, good for him for that. And then at the same time, Canelo is just ducking better opponents to fight someone for a massive payday as well. And so that takes away some of the interest from it for me. But I am, still they are two of the premier boxers of the last decade. So I have some interest. And I'm going to say, yeah, it's hard for me to call because in some ways, Canelo, there is weight class for regions, should beat up Bud, right? Bud's tremendously talented, but Canelo should beat him up. But Canelo hasn't really looked like Canelo for a while, the Canelo of old. And he also hasn't been fighting the competition he did in the past. So I'm just going to go on a limb and say, I still got to say weight classes matter. That Canelo's size, he's not massive bigger, but he is thicker. It's obvious that plays a part, and that he can do some damage. And his chin still holds up because he does have a very impressive chin. And he survives the fight. Maybe doesn't finish Bud, but hurts him a couple times to make it obvious that he wins rounds, and Canelo pulls it off in maybe even a controversial card, which he's done before. So that's my call. What happens? I'm gonna put some daylight between us. I'm gonna take Bud. I just want to go for the underdog in this. So I would not be shocked. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Bud gets killed because weight class have meaning. I also wouldn't be shocked if Bud pulls this off. One of the things about this fight makes it a little intriguing is that we haven't seen much of Bud in the last couple of years. He hasn't fought a ton since the Spence fight. And so there is some questions of where he's at, skill wise, his age, all that thing. So, I think that there's that. And also Canelo, maybe he comes ready to fight. And, his last couple of fights are just flukes for him, but I don't know. I mean, I'm intrigued enough to watch it. It's not like a joke of a fight. It's just, I think there were better fights to be made with these two. And yet they made this because these are the two biggest names they could put together without having Canelo get killed by David Benavidez. All right. Let's talk about Tommy Fury, because he made headlines this week when he falsely made claims on social media that he'd finished a grueling 100-kilometer endurance triathlon in France called the 1100 French Riviera. He received hundreds of thousands of likes and thousands upon thousands of congratulatory comments, but he never even finished the race. The articles floating around highlighted this, and they also highlighted his older brother Tyson's promise years ago to donate his entire multi-million-dollar purse from his first bout with Deontay Wilder to homeless charities, and then he blatantly never followed through on that promise. What are your thoughts on that? Well, first I'll do the Tommy Fury one. That wouldn't be so egregious or bad if at the end he just kind of laughed at it and said, "Of course I didn't finish it." It was kind of done as a joke. He said it, then I think that'd be acceptable. The other thing too is people are allowed to finish go across the finish line at the end without having finished all the parts of the race for this race. They let people that failed to finish the bike link portion in time or the running to cross the line at the end. I can't remember what the last, I think, is the bike the last? I can't remember what the last finish line for this was. But they only did that because weather
interrupted. Normally they wouldn't allow that, but because the weather interrupted, that's why they allowed it here. But that's not what he did. He went and bragged that he completed the whole thing without ever acknowledging.
Well, that again, I mean, if you just had crossed and then pointed it out to everybody, I didn't really complete the race, but we're allowed to do this. That also be acceptable. But the part is that if you're going to play it as a joke, you got to let people in somehow that they know it's a joke, or at least if they're paying attention, they know you're joking. So it's not that you're, stolen valor, but it's, from all accounts, it does seem like he's doing that. So, and it's not surprising when you see his brother Tyson Fury. And this is the part I liked about the story, is because let's bring, attention back to the fact that he just outright lied that he gave his entire 7 million pound purse, $10 million US to the homeless. I'm not big on going after people for exaggerating or lying. It's part of the fight business, except when they're lying about doing deeds like that. When you said you're giving money to help people, you're not allowed to suddenly pull a Michael from The Office and say you didn't assume that you'd ever have to really do it. You can't pull that off. So, and what's weird too is that Tyson Fury has made, like $100 million last year, according to the Company House UK report. It suggests that he made like $100 million. He has the money now to pay off that 7 million pounds to the homeless that he said he was going to do. And yet, from all accounts, he still hasn't done it, hasn't proven it. And so I have no problem with people constantly bringing this up because, it's something he should do. You said you're going to give money to the homeless. Give it to the goddamn homeless.
Yeah. I kind of did. I don't disagree with you, but I kind of believe that Tommy Fury said it was a joke because he got busted on this, because he wasn't saying that until he got busted. And then all of a sudden it became a joke, much like people do when they get caught in saying some messed up stuff. So I kind of feel like he got busted and relied on the easiest explanation that he could come up with. Oh, I was just kidding. But when he was accepting all of these congratulatory posts, it kind of looks funky. I don't have the faith in him that you do.
No, I have no faith in him too. I'm saying if he was going to play us off a joke, they should have gave a hint in the beginning. I mean, a good example is someone claiming that they won the Congressional Medal of Honor. Now that's stolen valor. If they did it in a way, that's terrible. But if they said they did it at Okinawa and they're 24 years old, I think it's pretty obvious they're not being serious. And then you give them a pass. If he had done something like that, I think it would have gone a long way. Where only the most clueless are congratulating him, and that would be part of the joke then, that you people do not understand that I just, I'm ribbing you. But I agree with you. I think in many ways he did. He just like, I'm getting a lot of attention. I'm going to run with this because he is, as an influencer, he's not really a boxer.
Yeah. So I'm with you there. All right. Let's talk about Richard Schaefer. Thomas Hauser had a profile piece on Richard Schaefer for Ring Magazine, and Schaefer said, in order to make boxing more viable, the wage share going to boxers might have to come down some, but it should or would never come down to UFC levels. What did you think of this article?
Well, the article, I mean, it's some interesting points. It was a little, it was a little too much one-sided, I think, for Thomas Hauser towards Schaefer. It was obviously trying to, it was a friendly piece. Let's put it that way. That's the nicest way to put it, is a friendly piece. But it did have some interesting tidbits about his time with Golden Boy. Of course, this is Schaefer's our point of view from his relationship with Golden Boy and Oscar de la Hoya. We'd want to get Oscar's take. It might be different. It talked about the current boxing climate and how he wants to get back in boxing. And that stuff was a little more interesting because he talked about the fact that wage share in boxing is too high. And there's many ways to read this article. One is he blames Matchroom of increasing the purses up to like 80% of the revenue. And so you could understand in some ways, maybe that's what he's saying. He's saying that before we had a business model that worked, where businesses were viable and guys were profitable, but Matchroom came in flush with money, pushed it up, and now companies are struggling and they can't pay. If that's the case, well, maybe it's true. Maybe that's correct. Maybe wage share of 80% is too high. But if he's saying boxing as a whole, for the year, the wage share the pay they've been giving fighters for decades now is too high and has to go down to like the other professional sports, 50% for professional sports. And then, although he did note it should not go down or will not go down to the UFC's 15 to 20%, that would be more viable for the business. And I have to question that because one is, we've had these promotions paying these high wage shares in boxing, 60, 70% plus, for decades now. We have from the antitrust lawsuit, we have evidence from they entered in of a Golden Boy paying over 60%, of Top Rank paying over 70%. We have Matchroom saying for years that they pay 70 or so percent, and then Schaefer here saying up to 80%. So, but those large wage shares have been paid for decades now, and it doesn't seem to like put these companies out of business. They are viable. The financial reporting that's been released, I don't know what Golden Boy is like now, but during the antitrust period or the discovery period that they have entered for the class action, also the part of the lawsuit against PBC or Al Heyman, I should say, Golden Boy was making money. They showed in those documents. Matchroom, their filings with the company house, both them and Queensberry Promotions, both them show that they're making money, maybe not vast profits, but making money. And so part of me wonders if what he's saying about viable is what he said about the professional sports teams, is how they're worth billions of dollars for a single team. And one of the reasons they're worth billions of dollars is because, and especially one of the reasons why the UFC is worth billions of dollars, is because the revenue is so vast and that the wage share is low enough that there's money to be made on those, as well as that there's a limited number of sports teams, so it's a monopoly. And actually, Matthew Stoller had a piece on sports monopolies just the other day, worth reading, talking about how sports are, very susceptible to monopolization and forces like that, and which is why, because that's the whole reason why sports teams are worth so much, is there's a monopoly. The league limits the number of teams because they can limit the number of teams. The valuation of those teams grow because there's a limited number, there's scarcity. And so not Thomas Hauser, but I should say Schaefer in this piece, he seems to be making the argument is not that the wage share is too high for these companies to be viable. Perhaps it's too high for the asset price, the value of the brand, the asset of the promotion is hurt because they could gain a lot more value if the fighters were paid less. In which I argue that doesn't seem, again, I'm not sure I'm a fan of that, because why should the fighters have to take a pay cut so that people that are not fighting can see something, maybe not cash, but can see an asset increase in value? I'm not a big fan of that. But overall, that part was interesting in the piece. And I also thought was interesting, too, is, again, confirmation from we get this time and time again, and yet people seem to deny it or not believe it, that the wage share in boxing is higher than it is in MMA, UFC. The pay for most of the fighters, especially the top ones, is higher in boxing than in MMA, UFC. But people seem to constantly go back and pretend that's not the case. And yet we get that confirmation again and again and again from people in the industry that should know.
All right. Now we're going to stay on the same track here and continue talking about boxing, because the California State Athletic Commission had a meeting today to discuss and possibly take some sort of action regarding the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. Now, you listened to the meeting. Give us the cliff notes of what happened.
Well, this was a fairly interesting day. They had a meeting at the California State Athletic Commission up in Sacramento. I was able to log on and watch it during my lunch break at work. And the purpose of this meeting, they had a couple things on the agenda, but agenda item number 6 is they wanted to discuss the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act, and also to discuss possible ways to show support on behalf of the bill if they passed a motion to support it. So that was the request. They're going to have a meeting to discuss it, and then possibly there was going to be a motion to support it, and they'd have a vote to support it. And the suggested ways they could show support was either by writing a letter in support and sending it to Congress, or voting to send Foster or some other members of the commission to Congress to testify at hearings on behalf of the bill. And so that was the purpose. So they went through it, discussed the bill a little bit, had some comments from outsiders. They had a vote actually very early in it, which they to vote in support of it, and they were ready to support it. But because of what took place during the meeting, they tabled that vote, and I will save that cliffhanger for later in our discussion here, because that was a kind of interesting thing that happened today.
Now, my understanding is that Andy Foster made this whole presentation. What did he say about the bill itself?
Yeah, he had like a 16-page, no, more than 16, like 25, 26-page presentation deck, slide deck to go through the bill. And it was very much in support. I think people, if you pay attention to this show, if you've been paying attention to this story, you're probably not surprised that Andy Foster was very much in support of it. He really stressed a lot of the benefits of like the medical requirements, increasing the minimum medicals for boxers, the insurance coverage, the minimum insurance coverage being increased to 25%, the minimum purse, that the minimum pay per round would be increased to $150.
Wait, 25% or 25,000?
25,000.
Okay.
Sorry about that. 25,000, and then $150 per round. Now it should be noted that California already meets these requirements. These would be nationally. So he was stressing something that would help boxers outside of California, but would not, impact California at all. But he then continued. He talked about that there's something called a unified boxing organization. He stressed again that it doesn't get rid of the Ali Act. It's a parallel system that fighters can choose on their own. He stressed that can choose on their own to sign up for. And that it doesn't, if they want, they can still be part of the other system, be ranked by the sanctioning organizations, but they can compete in this UBO system. And what it does, the pros are it sets a pay scale for the boxers, according to Andy Foster, similar pay for males and females, that gets rid of purse bids, no belt fees, no sanctioning body fees, no supervisor fees. And then it has increased medical standards, required drug testing, increased ambulances, things like that. Now, some of these things, I think people would push back because the no purse bids, if you speak to anybody in boxing, we had many people in boxing on the show. We've discussed the subject with them, with Stephen Espinoza, with Kurt Emhoff, with others. Purse bids drive up the price for boxers. Boxers make more because of purse bids. And so the idea that getting rid of purse bids would be better for the boxers, I'm not quite certain of where he got that idea. I think one thing he stressed was to get rid of step-aside money, which that might be a positive, but we could fix that some other way. He also brought up the TKO pay structure scale and stressed how that would be better for most boxers. 80% of the boxers he talked about. And this one I also have a quibble with. He brought up the pay scale that Lance Pugmire posted, but if people remember when we talked about the contract, that pay scale is not the only one that the TKO is offering for boxers. Some of it lower weight classes have smaller purses. So the numbers he was throwing around for all weight classes, 70, 150,000 for defending the company championship. That's for some fighters, but others are fighting for like $400,000 for the championship. So that would greatly lower the purses for those ranked boxers. And so that's all the positives he brought up. And then he had a list of negatives, and his list of negatives were boxers' maximum pay will be capped until a contract negotiation, possible that sanctioning bodies will not rank or will rank the UBO boxer at a lower rank, and unable to compete for belts with the sanctioning organizations. And I mean, all I could think of is when he brought up these negatives is that he didn't put a lot of thought to the other potential negatives, and that maybe he should have listened to our podcast when we had people on to discuss the other possible negatives, because there's a lot more possible negatives than he listed. The possibility that the UBO can now be free to use coercive contracts, I think, would be high on the list. The possibility that that there would be that one of the great complaints of boxing is right now is that there's not there's not co-promotion. And here it basically, the UBO denies, makes illegal co-promotion. So there's a long list of other problems you can have with UBOs in addition to the 3 that he came up with. The other interesting thing he did I want to highlight is he had a comparison of purses. And he brought up the California World title fights, and he pointed out that in the last 10 years, there's been something like 165 title fights in California, and that the boxing purses, the average male boxer, the A side of those title fights averaged $404,000. The B side averaged $201,000. The median pay for the A side was $200,000. The median pay for the B side was $75,000. And then if you went just by male fighters, the average male fighter was $470,000, $234,000 for the B. But females were much lower. Female fighters, A side was only $62,000 on average, and $32,000 for the B side. So those are the numbers. People are probably confused, and I will put this deck in the description of our podcast on Substack, so you can go through it and follow these numbers. But I found it kind of interesting that he brought this up for a couple reasons. One is he stressed that it's a myth that UFC fighters get paid less than boxers. And I hope that's a myth, that people actually believe that, because, again, you got to remember, UFC fighters are the top 3% of MMA fighters in the world. And the fact that you would say that they get paid less than boxers, well, there's thousands of boxers. We're talking about the top 3% of MMA in a promotion that says they get 90% of all the revenue. So you would think on average, the average UFC fighter definitely gets more than the average boxer. The question is, do they make more than boxers in their the similar situation? And I don't think the evidence says they do. Maybe the undercard UFC fighters make more, a little bit more than what a boxer in a similar situation make, but the top guys make much less. And the numbers he cited for the championship kind of indicates that. Comparing it to the just for California, there were 168 title fights or 165 title fights in California in 10 years. Well, that's 33 fights, 33 purses per year. That is more purses than the UFC paid out in California during that time. Do we think California purses averaged, not California, but you think UFC purses in California the last 10 years over those 11 events they held, averaged $400,000 per fighter? Do you think the median fighter in the UFC was making about $200,000 a fight during that period? I don't think so. I do not think so. But, and again, these are the reported payouts to the commission. This does not include some of the unreported payouts.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face!